go next? I know you did want to talk to me a little bit about my book, but we
Yes,
can
I
go
did.
wherever you want to go. I'm going to let you run the show for a second here, and let me know what you want to chat about. What do you want to communicate about here?
Well, I would like to talk about your book for a while, if that's okay, because
It's
I recently
fine.
read it for the second time, and I'd really like to throw some passages out and to just speak with you about the things that your book brings to my mind.
Okay, that sounds great, and I'm actually honored you read my book. Thank you for
Oh, it
reading
was
it.
easy to read. I come from the school that loves to read some of the stuff that's been done by people like Rimbaud and Philip K. Dick. So this book was right up my alley.
Excellent. Very cool.
So, well, I'd like to start with a passage from page 64,
Okay.
and you say, and this is what you wrote. I quote. I found myself awake in a room which appeared quite familiar. I sat up looking at a clock. The time in the illusion was 12 midnight. The clock's arms started moving in reverse, and there was a pressure like that of magnetic fields colliding at once. There was an unsettling noise in the skies and what appeared as a very large incoming object. So, what impresses me about this passage is it seems to encapsulate your perspective or worldview in some ways, and it's also poetry while still being a part of the narrative of the book. And when I see combinations of different types of literature in passages like this one, it reminds me of a lot of other writers that I've experienced over the years, like Nietzsche and sci-fi writers like Philip K. Dick. So with all that coming from me, what can you tell us about the influences behind this book? Like the style and the narrative and sort of the content.
Well, I can tell you that this book itself, The 1 Million Miles to Midnight, which is my new release, Between the Mirror and the Lens, is a spin-off of the Eye of the Remote series insofar as where I've been with covert technology and artificial intelligence interface with the synthetic telepathy. And a lot of that has to deal with the expansion insofar as not just looking at it as a covert harassment program or programming with Manchurian, but actually looking at the eye of the communication system itself and where it comes from, insofar as what this is really about on a multi-layered level. And we're dealing with artificial intelligence and a morphing world, and that's what I touch on in the book. So for me, I am a poet at heart, and I've written poetry since I was very, very young, and I've always been on that esoteric path. So I tend to actually do that. I merge poetry and words and verbiage in with the knowledge and the wisdom and the technical stuff that I know about with where I've been with this technology. So that's pretty much what I saw was what's happening here on this timeline, but also what's syncing up on an artificial intelligence level, on a multi-layered level, on a multidimensional level, and a multiversal level. And the scenery behind it is that we are dealing with something advanced in ascended machine technology that's interfacing with multiple world realities beyond our control, beyond the government's control, beyond the military industrial complex's control. This technology is going to morph and do what it wants to do regardless of mankind and what mankind's doing here on this planet. And that's my point is also that we are morphing through this planet. We are changing. Our DNA is changing. Our consciousness is changing. Those of us who are ascending are moving up and stepping up, and the other people are kind of flatlining, if you noticed. So yeah, the book itself does cover a lot of different things. It's a short read, but it's a very in-depth read. And like I said, I thank you for the kind words. It's quite flattering actually for me to hear what you have to say about it. And I don't have any ego, but it's really nice to hear good things about it and how you perceive it.
Well, there's a certain pattern, like you mentioned, you used the term layered to
Mm-hmm.
describe this. It certainly is. There's a certain pattern or combination of different styles that I've detected in only some writers throughout the decades, going back to the 60s. And this book certainly has it. In some ways, it reminds me of some of the poetry I've read by Jim Morrison. And so
Interesting.
if you've never checked that out, you should really check out some of Jim Morrison's poetry. Um, and
You're not the first
another,
person who's told me that, Jason. I have a book of poetry that I started writing in the 80s, and people used to tell me that. Yeah, that's
really,
funny. Yeah, I
it's
never read his
certainly,
work.
well, he's one of my favorite writers, believe it or
Oh,
not.
cool. Yeah, I'll have to check it out. Yeah.
Um, so there's another passage that I really enjoy uh, from chapter 2. You wrote, one one can now see how devolution led to the destruction of mankind. At that time in the illusion, their beliefs were their self-destruct sequence. And I simply love that passage because, all through the 20th century, Western man has experienced various isms. We've had fascism, communism, capitalism, and now the cultural delusion we call ultraliberalism. But what I find the most intriguing about all these supposedly conflicting ways of governing ourselves is that they are all designed to operate well within the Western system of taxes, corporations, and warfare. So do you think it's possible, Solaris, that all of the supposedly different options continually advertised to us are all just masks for a self-destruct sequence?
Absolutely. In my opinion, I feel like mankind's been wasting his time. We've been sitting here chewing a bone that literally is non-productive. Everybody and their mother here in the illusion for century after century has been programmed, indoctrinated into a false matrix, and consumed by a program that literally affects them when they transfer out to such a level, Jason, that when they transfer out, they go into these alternate realities that are based on false realities and false matrices, which entrap them and put them back here on an incarnation that they don't need to be on. When in fact we should be off planet doing other things and other multiversal levels way beyond the spectrum of where we are. And a lot of people will say, well, we're just, these are just humanoids. We're not human. We're star people in suits. And we have to step up to that consciousness level. But what bothers me the most is that you and I know this, and many others who are listening, we have been subjected to such a brainwash and a brain hack that, it's time for people to understand that we have to deprogram, and that all of this stuff going on here shouldn't even be happening here on this timeline. So it is about the deception game playing out, and certainly they have destroyed themselves by their belief systems. It's mankind that dooms himself in every single day of the week, as you're seeing it right now. This is what's concerning me. That what's happening here on this world, it shouldn't be going this way, okay? And we all know it shouldn't be going this way. Not in this dark rift. It shouldn't. So.
Well, you do write also, this is another quote, like a sandcastle at the ocean's shore, the design is a minimal reflection of a world temporary and fragile to the universal mind. It is too bad mankind did not see this before the final destruction, yet then again, those who did were never acknowledged, just shunned or pushed aside with ignorance. This reminded me of when I woke up to the greater geopolitical reality on this planet. I was 15 years old, and it was very difficult to be that age and to understand things like the New World Order and the Federal Reserve and what really happened in World War II. But now I feel like I'm living in an age when a lot of things that people used to hate for you to share with them are becoming parts of everyday conversations like I never expected. And so I guess my question for you is, if an awakening is happening, and it seems like there is a type of awakening occurring, what steps do you believe we should take in order to steer a more favorable course of human destiny?
Well, I think insofar as what's going on here with awakening, those of us who are awake are stepping up, and we are out on radio, or we're doing things with books and teaching, or whatever it is we're doing to be there as sacred witnesses, but also to talk about what's happening on an ascension level insofar as enlightenment goes. So I do believe that's already in motion. However, you're also seeing the opposing forces, that they can't handle evolution in consciousness. For some reason, they're afraid to keep going forward. They're afraid to let go of their past. They're afraid to let go of the programming and the conditioning. So they're not willing to step up to that frequency or that state of consciousness, which leads to enlightenment. But I would say we have to, in my opinion, we have to get fortified together. What I say is like one vision, one voice. It means that those of us who resonate at the frequency of higher consciousness and evolution, we keep ascending, we need to make sure we stay together. We cannot be separated, in the sense that I honestly believe that we should find a way that we are all connected more closely. I'm not, I know it sounds strange, but we really need to unify ourselves across the globe. We need to unify as pillars of light, like beacons of light across the globe. And we need to start fortifying this and standing even stronger than we have. And we're coming up with resistance. I mean, this is something you're seeing here on a global scale. You're seeing those of us who stand up and are being counted are trying to get, and people are attacking us. They're trying to put them in jail or fine people or censor the truth, because they always want to censor what they can't handle. And we see this more often than we should. So, but I think we are doing the right thing. We're doing so much. I mean, beings like us and a lot of listeners who are star people, consciousness-oriented, good people out there, we're doing the best we can in consciousness. And now we have people in the illusion of power, which they have the responsibility right now to make things right on that level of that benchmark in consciousness. And if they're not able to do that, then that is a huge problem. But I do see that the universe is going to have the final word on this, and that mankind needs to prepare for that, because it's kind of like get your surfboard out and be ready to navigate, because that's what's happening. So, but I think we're doing fine, quite honestly. But at the same time, the rest of them are just like, I don't know what to say anymore, Jason, about some of these units on this planet because they're really messed up. They're just not switched on, and I don't think they want to be.
Well, it's really interesting what you said about finding a way to unify people with one voice. I would suggest to the creative people in this audience that are searching for new ways to awaken more people and to drive more people that you study the collective unconscious of C.G. Jung, because there you will find that there are symbols that people universally respond to, whether voluntarily or involuntarily. And I think, honestly, that one of the biggest problems with our movement is we know the things that we don't want, but we can never agree with what we do want.
Mm-hmm.
There have been numerous movements over the last few years that had the potential to make a great effect upon Western society.
Mm-hmm.
But the issue is that we never seem to agree with what we want. So,
right.
It is certainly time to come to terms with the things that we believe would make for a better society.
Mm-hmm.
In your book, you describe the destruction of Earth by warfare.
Mm-hmm.
That brings about a collapse of the planetary orbit. And
Mm-hmm.
in the book, the elite abandon the planet in ships made specifically for them, and you make it clear that it is they who engineered this destruction in the first place. And I find this to be basically a reflection of the world we actually live in today, because I have to tell you, Solaris, that it's becoming increasingly apparent to me that a tiny group of individuals are essentially using global organizations to perpetuate agendas with warfare, poverty, and the death sentence known as modern medicine. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I agree with you on that one, and it's interesting when you look and see what we have with the Black Sciences Department, for example, and the Black Space programs, and that which has been unseen but actually very effective in running the show behind the scenes. That's the corridor that we've never walked through, and that's the one that's usually the great manipulator. So I see that, yeah, it's like a mass eugenics program that they've been deploying for a very long time, but it's a slow kill and a slow death. And now they're trying to expedite things, and in my opinion, the reason they're doing so is because they're very clear about the powers and the frequencies connecting and descending onto not only this world, but multiple world realities that awakens consciousness, that activates DNA. It allows us to grow and evolve on a higher spiritual level. So these people are understanding that once we get an idea about our empowerment, our celestial heritage, what we are as avatar consciousness, then we have the power. We can do the things that they have covert technology to do. In other words, your body can take you through journeys in consciousness. You can phase shift, biolocate. I mean, this sounds esoteric, but it's actually the real thing when you start modulating frequency. It's all about frequency and consciousness. So that's really the keys and the codes. And this is why they're dying to sit here and control and manipulate brainwave activity and the collective, because they have to keep everybody contained in one linear frequency. They can't stand the idea of people expanding out of that. Well, now you see all these energies spiking up everywhere across the board here. So, their whole agenda has been poisoned from day one. It's a poison arrow. It truly is. And it's non-transmutable, in my opinion, unless you know how, as an alchemist, as a spiritual being, to ascend out of this well that they've created. So in the book, yeah, it does talk about that, and it is kind of foreboding and ominous, but that is the maelstrom behind it all. That's really what's been going on here. And if people were to understand how insidious these people are and what access they've had with reverse engineered technologies, what they're deploying with covert psychotronics, covert artificial telepathy, the things that they do for mind hacks, brain hacks, that's like big. That is a big deal. So, this is where we're heading. And I think that opening it up and showing people what has been going on here is very significant. But at the same time, as I said before, there's bigger forces at play, because when you start playing chess with the multiverse and the cosmic design, they're not going to win. These people aren't going to win. These wannabe elites, they're just not going to make it.
Well, that sets us up perfectly for what I wanted to talk to you about next, which is this quote, also from 1 Million Miles to Midnight. If there was such a thing as hell, mankind created it, and without help from any space beings, demons, or gods. Mankind blew it, even with all the sacred celestial markers left on Earth for his awakening. You know, I believe that one reason humanity is blowing it is the powerful trance that's been created through entertainment media. Solaris, would you agree that television, Hollywood, and popular culture generally serve to transform humanity into mindless servants?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's definitely called programming for a reason, and the television is poison. It's another toxin. Mainstream media is nothing but lies and deception, run by CIA and covert intelligence programs. Most of the time, we have the quote unquote acting community, which are nothing but non-Americans. If you ask me, they're anti-American, anti-freedom, anti-free will, but they're the first ones to take your money in your bank accounts and steal it while they pretend to be actors on stage. Then we have the music industry, which I've had a real one-on-one taste about with covert technology and covert harassment and synthetic telepathy and covert programs with certain specific bands. So I understand very clearly the toxicity and the game playing that goes on and the control mechanisms, because when these people are out there in the illusion of fame and fortune, which is just basically actors and playing parts, but the bottom line is they're the puppets on the strings, and they're there with their handlers and controllers making sure that they are luring people in, deceiving them, lying to them, and they've done a huge disservice to the people of this world by lying and deceiving and being part of the problem and not the solution.
Very nice. Now, would you say that the type of control that we see sort of enforced upon the population through popular culture and big news outlets like CNN, would this represent a type of black magic in the classical sense?
I would say so, because they're using symbolism. They're taking everything. They're taking energy. They're taking frequency. They're taking symbols and numbers, imprints of some kind here and there to control, manipulate the masses through a subconscious psychic imprint. So yeah, they're using the esoteric teachings and reversing it, inverting it to some degree. So yeah, they're using all those things and many different levels for a psychological impact. And it's not just the mainstream media that's doing it; it's everybody. I mean, judicial systems, you see it everywhere. It's all across the board that they're doing these things. And once again, symbols are great. It's how you use the symbol, but it's also the psychological effect it has on the target. Because as we all know, you're seeing more and more symbols today. Like take ISIL, for example. I call them ISIL. They want to call themselves Isis. Isis was a goddess. We don't, but they want to bastardize the divine feminine. So what do? They steal the name. They hijack the name. And now everybody associates Isis, the goddess, with these filthy SOBs from the Middle East, right? That were trained by covert intelligence from our country. So once again, you see how this is happening. The swastika is another one. All these symbols are not negative symbols, right? But they're taking these symbols and they're bastardizing the symbols. And once again, it's a psychological impact. It's a psy-war. It's a psyop. And they know exactly what they're doing, Jason. And I'll tell you, I think everything today is a psyop. I think everything is psychological warfare at its worst right now.
Well, speaking of propaganda, it calls to mind the fact that your book has a lot to say about warfare. And in a passage on page 26, you say, you've written, as oh too often, the race of mankind engaged in destroying himself by attacking those he was threatened by. One of the interesting things about being a student of anthropology is that I've learned, and most academics understand, that professional or mercenary armies only appeared around 4,500 to 5,000 years ago with the dawn of the Copper Age. But what's important about that is that the earliest humans to strongly resemble our lifestyle today appeared as early as 28,000 years ago. And these were individuals who had inherited land, they had high-quality clothing, they had a family unit, and they even carved toys for their children. 28,000 years ago, compared to the age of warfare being around 4,500 years. So really, put into this perspective, organized warfare is relatively young in the overall scheme of things in human history. Mm-hmm. And yet, within 4,000 years, it seems to be pushing us close to total annihilation. Now, some people hold the theory that warfare is a natural instinct of man and that it's inevitable. But from your book, I seem to be getting the impression that you intend to suggest that warfare itself is an unnatural behavior. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, we're not supposed to be warring with each other in any form or dimensional space. And I believe a lot of the warring has a lot to do with connection to source, connection to multiversal, what we call celestial heritage and higher consciousness. I mean, the source energy, the creation of source. People create false gods all they want, but if it's not a pure energy and a pure line of what we call higher consciousness, it's going to contaminate them with entity control, possible, whatever you want to call these parasites, brain parasites, mental parasites, whatever you want to call them. So a lot of this has to do with people's disconnection. You're seeing a world out of control here because people are not connected to the higher levels of consciousness. And in the name of God, they do the most insidious things. In the name of their fake gods, out of the, for example, the Muslims, their fake God, the God they pull out of their ideology, they do horrific things in the name of this ideology. This is not anything connected to any divine source energy. Are you kidding me? And yet people will eat it up like ice cream. So we do have some big problems here. But no, we're not designed to be like this. And unfortunately, that's part of the setup. That's part of the game playing that they're doing here, the polarization effect and enemy patterning and everything else that's associated.
That's very well said. Speaking of war and propaganda and also illusion, this is another passage from your book, quote, "Yet many of the masters of control chose the game of deception rather than communicating the truth beyond the veil." From the standpoint of my own research, I can certainly attest to the fact that our would-be masters are definitely working to hide a lot of information concerning anthropology, ancient cultures, and civilizations. But Solaris, how deep do you believe the deception is today? In other words, how much do you believe the controllers are hiding from the man at large at the present time?
Oh, wow, it's infinite. It's an infinite thing. I mean, insofar as what's going on with technology, information, the weaponization of the esoteric world and the weaponization of the supernatural and the paranormal, the bottom line is that they have decided, I believe, to think that they become their own gods. In other words, they've decided to make themselves their own gods with whatever formula they're using, with not even transhumanism at this point in the continuum. But it has a lot to do with stealing information. And you can blame a lot of this on covert intelligence, because the reason that they've been able to progress with reverse engineer technology to the level they have is because of the people doing the damage control. A lot of that is global intelligence agencies. They were the ones running behind the scenes, making sure, doing damage control, spreading propaganda, making sure mainstream media was censoring and airbrushing. So all of this stuff has been going on for a very, very long time. But insofar as what we should have access to and what we know, it's infinite. And the bottom line is, those of us who understand consciousness are able to decode this naturally. We have a celestial birthright and gift. It's free will oriented, and they can't interfere. So those are the things that we have which blow them out of the water. If any of us were to go into the Black Science Department who are advanced in consciousness, we would be able to understand everything they're doing because we understand the mechanics of the multiverse. That's our language. That's our true geometric light language. They wouldn't be able to handle that. So I think you're seeing a collision with those, as you touched on probably earlier, was, those of us who are advanced in consciousness, meaning we're high intellectual beings, but we're very sharp and savvy when it comes to what's really going on behind the scenes, versus them who keep everybody dumbed down. And you know what the problem is? You start keeping people dumbed down. If you lie long enough, like Pinocchio, eventually you become stupid. And this is what I always say. This is why you're seeing a lot of stupid people in the government. Stupid people, because they lie so much, they're losing it. They don't have any intellect anymore or spiritual compass.
Oh, I've definitely seen that. I wonder who these babbling baboons are sometimes.
Well, that's a good analogy, because I think that's what they are.
Oh, certainly. I mean, one problem probably is Washington, D.C. has a high consumption rate of cocaine, and I think a lot of it goes through Congress.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned the weaponization of the paranormal earlier. And in your book, you talk about weaponized telepathy that brought down civilizations. Mm-hmm. Now, that's very interesting to me, because there are numerous researchers who've actually written about governmental ESP projects. And what many people do not know, one of the subjects I've researched is Himmler's Ahnenerbe. The Ahnenerbe was the archaeological division of the Third Reich, and this organization was charged with finding traces of the Aryan super race in the archaeological record. It was personally directed by Heinrich Himmler. What is less known is that there was an R&D division of the Ahnenerbe which was trying to find ESP abilities in people that the eugenicists determined were of the purest Aryan blood. Now, the research of the Ahnenerbe was picked up by the CIA and the Department of Defense after Operation Paperclip following World War II, and according to some journalists, such as Annie Jacobson, for an example, this was the true origin of this type of research by the United States government. So my question is, Solaris, to what degree do you believe these types of projects are operating in the United States today?
Well, I can tell you just from my own personal experience and induction in 2004, these things are operating in the Black Science Department for sure. And those who have special clearances with what I would say the Black Space Program and certain areas in the regular mainstream covert intelligence areas, because the synthetic telepathy is the ultimate sci-spy communication system. It's good for intelligence gathering. And as I said before, once you get interconnected with what we call the artificial intelligence communication system, you have a live feed real-time communication with operators, handlers, controllers. You have sci-spy technology that's capable of navigating and also manipulating, but also being the eyes and ears and seeing through, literally hacking the entire host of the person who's the target, who's operating with the technology. So it's already operational. It's been used in the military. You can look into DARPA and some other contracts that are going on right now. But this stuff is the real deal. And I was a test pilot for this in 2004 before I even knew what they were doing to me. I was very clear. And this is why the spinoff came with the whole Eye of the Remote series. But the technology's there and it's being used. Unfortunately, they've also taken these projects and have been using them for warfare insofar as artificial telepathy interface and also psychotronics, where they're triangulating a target remotely from satellite or from other areas and literally harassing them to brain map them, to access them, to see how much they can take or what kind of duress they can go under, how much they can program into them, how they receive the programs. So all of this is a weapon of war. And what's really interesting is we're talking about all these things that are happening right now with North Korea and other areas, China and Russia. You know, all of those guys have access to covert harassment programming and electronic jamming systems. We all know that. So literally, you're dealing with something that can go bad really quick on a global scale once they start triangulating people. Can make you very, very sick. These are remote death weapons. They're like worse than the death ray because they can take people down, remotely. They can stop your heart and they can do things like that. So it is the psychic war. It's the weaponized synthetic telepathy war. And it's an ancient, this isn't something new because we're naturally telepathic. We're all natural consciousness-oriented beings. All they're doing is weaponizing our electromagnetic fields, our neural circuits, and our brainwave activity into the program, which is artificial intelligence-based. So, it's very concerning.
For the audience, I just want to point out that some of the things you just mentioned have been testified in front of Congress, such as the heart attack gun and the MK Ultra experiments of the CIA. And you can actually find the references to these things in the congressional record, and I think you'll be shocked if you'll take the time to investigate those. So my final question that pertains to 1 million miles till midnight really comes after a quote, and it is actually for the entire audience listening to this show and anyone else that may hear it in the future. Before I ask the question, I'll read from page 54 of your terrific book. And this is the quote. I could never imagine those who would choose to replace inner peace with the noise of man-made static. Yet, on the old Earth, it was just that, a noisy, non-productive planet producing more static than any light-conscious design. The previous occupants appeared to have wanted it that way. Close quote. So my final question is this, and it's a question for everyone. Is it not time we shut off the static in our lives? Is it not time to silence the barrage of images, sound, and symbolism spewing from our televisions, phones, stereos, and computers? At what point do we as humans stop seeking distractions and artificial ideas and thoughts to fill our minds? When do we finally choose to break the spell of entertainment, money, and artificial paradises over our lives and truly begin to live again? When will we, united together, look our would-be masters in the eye and remember how to say the most powerful word in the universe? No. And that's my final question.
Wow. I must say I agree with you 100%. That's a beautiful question. And I applaud you for what you just communicated, because I don't know how to answer that other than the way you just did. That's perfect. That's exactly it. There's too much static, too much noise, and people are too busy being distracted by things that are non-productive. And that was the way they set it up to begin with. So, yeah, removing yourself from any type of noisy communication system, mainstream media, televisions, whatever it is, and even the iPhones. I mean, you've got to power those down at some point in the continuum. People need to take a break. I live away from people. I live out towards nature, and I tell you what, I wouldn't trade that for anything. I appreciate what's left of this world. I try to appreciate the nature as best I can. The trees and the nature, and you see the chemtrails, and you're seeing all sorts of things, but don't take advantage of what's here, is my point, because they're simulating way too much for you, to a point where everybody's so busy looking at things on their iPhones, they're not looking at the animals in front of them, or nature, or people, and it's getting out of control. And you're seeing a dehumanization. You're seeing the way people are no longer able to communicate anymore. A lot of people don't have socialization skills. They're not good in public. They're not good at talking to each other. They can't even hold a conversation without looking at their iPhone. They have PTSD with their iPhones. So yeah, we have some issues here, and it's all about entrainment and social engineering.
It certainly is. It's heartbreaking for a person who's a natural librarian, as I am, as I suspect you are.
Yeah.
When you go to a bookstore and it's just a bunch of kids sitting around on their iPhones.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's ridiculous.
Remember the Book of the Month Club when you were a kid? I don't know if you remember that or not, but I used to love those.
Oh, seriously, I was a member of numerous book clubs all throughout life, because I just love discussing books. I love talking about literature and philosophy. And that's what makes these conversations with you so important, Solaris.
Well, likewise, I must say, Jason, thank you for asking me those incredible questions, by the way. You have a way of communicating that is very profound. And I'll tell you what, you make an awesome host, and whatever you decide to do, I see you out there. Documentaries come to mind. You have a way of interpolating data, which is very unique. And most people, they can read through my book and they may not understand a lot of that, but you did. You understood it on that multi-layered level, which I applaud you for doing. So, and thank you. And once again, it's, very appreciated. And I do encourage people to purchase the book. It's not very expensive, and it's on Amazon. And I'll tell you what, it really will give you an idea of what we're dealing with here. So it's a shameless plug, but not really.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would recommend that people interested in reading this book, that they take it someplace away from their electronic devices, away from distractions, and just spend some time with it. It's a very slim book, but that does not mean that you want to read it all in one day. These passages need to be meditated upon, because this is a book of philosophy that's wrapped in a narrative. And it really and truly reminds me of some of my favorite writers. Didn't you have the privilege of interviewing Philip K. Dick's wife on your show?
I did. I interviewed Tessa Dick, and it was an honor to have her on the show. I certainly did. And, Philip K. Dick he's one of my favorites also. So very interesting that he was shadowed by government and apparently harassed to some degree. So he was always dealing with them, peering over his shoulder, and also doing some things which I feel were more covert harassment oriented with him. So, yeah.
And you've been subjected to, I've seen your documentary, and I am, one of the most remarkable things about your story is what you have to say about the music industry, because I know a thing or two about the music industry myself. For example, what do Jay-Z, Lady Gaga, Rihanna and Marilyn Manson all have in common? They're all part of the Ordo Templi Orientis in California. So, what can you share with us about the ins and outs of how the music industry has actually been used to experiment upon people?
Well, I think what happens is I don't believe that these people are just all of a sudden pulled into these high-profile positions in the entertainment industry. I think they're pre-selected. I think it's part of the selection process. And also the fact of the matter is they have to give something to these covert cabals in order to be in the positions that they're in. And from what I saw, because I was very unique. I mean, insofar as innocent, I didn't understand anything about the industry itself, and I literally had a very innocent communication with somebody in the band who I had no idea this person was involved in this covert program until I reestablished communication with him in 2004, and then also they hit me with the program. And then he pulled me in. He wanted me to know about this program. They were dying to let me know, and I can tell you what they're involved in. Yes, they're involved in a lot of what we call insidious. I wouldn't even call it magic at this point. It's some sick kind of ritualistic behavioral program, but it also deals with covert intelligence, covert harassment, psychotronic warfare, and things that are based on artificial intelligence and artificial telepathy. And I'm not saying all these people in the music industry have access to it, but I guarantee you, as I found out, that the surveillance personnel, if they're high profile with maybe access and contracts to military, like Mossbach was with me, they have access to the covert programs. They have access to the synthetic telepathy projects and everything else associated with EEG cloning and heterodyning, which tells me that they're using a lot of mind control in the project. And also, don't forget that they can overlay frequencies onto songs. In other words, they can create a nice musical theme or song in a studio somewhere, but they can also insert other things in there subconsciously or subliminally. They do forensics cleanup sometimes, but there's so much insidious stuff happening here that they're literally trying to mesmerize people and pull them into this false matrix. And what I found very sad for what happened to me was that I had respect for these people in the industry until I found out what they were doing and until they pulled me into the program. And now I look at them like I can't stand them. They make me sick. And they actually were indoctrinated into the Hall of Fame, which I call the Hall of Shame. And I can tell you point blank, you know what? If people only knew the insidious side of these people in the entertainment industry, if you only knew what they were involved in, I don't care how good a musician they are. I don't care how good they sing. I don't care what you think you know about them. If you had any idea the kind of insidious crap they're involved in, you would want nothing to do with their albums. You would ban them. So I'll tell you point blank, it makes me angry. And I'm still very, like I said, it's been a long time. It's been 14 years and I still have residual stuff going on because of the technology. So it's a sore spot with me, big time, as you probably can tell.
The elites have used entertainment as a way of governing the masses for thousands of years. It's nothing new. I mean, it's famously known that the Greeks did so because they were one of the first visible civilizations to have an entire caste of entertainers whose sole function was to serve the ends of the state in the plays and the songs that were used to sort of indoctrinate the public. So it's interesting that all of a sudden we think we're living in a time when that should be any different as a culture.
Right. No, and it's just been weaponized.
Exactly. I see the celebrities today in the United States, if I may, I see them as a type of a self-replicating entity. In other words, we have all these magazines and websites and other types of media which regurgitate the supposed opinions of entertainers, and then younger people begin to imitate and adopt these opinions. And it almost seems as if they're simply being used to tell people what the proper political opinions are at the time.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's their role models, so they're influenced by their role models. Their role models can do no wrong. That's the problem. They put them on these pedestals and they start worshiping these people in the illusion of fame and fortune to a point where they lose themselves. You never want. My grandmother used to say, never. What is it? Forget the word now, but it was really good. Don't believe anybody's light is brighter than your own or shines brighter than your own, is to that effect. And I believe that. You look into your own light and your own source energy. You don't sit there and worship idols, false idols, and that includes people in the entertainment industry. When I've ever communicated with people who are high profile, and I've been around a lot of high profile people, I treat them like regular people. I don't treat them like they're special. I treat them like they're just people. But unfortunately, they're stuck in their little egos and they want people to worship them. But I can tell you, and that's what they want, Jason. They love having all these people and these crowds adoring them and sending them all this energy they can suck up like vampires. So literally, they're there as the prop and the puppet to absorb the collective and program the collective to some degree so that they can have them inserted into these false matrices, which is all about social engineering. And now you're seeing it here with these kids acting up, who follow Lady Gugu and all these other people. If she says something against President Trump, well, everybody else is going to jump on the bandwagon. Madonna's another one I can't stand. I mean, these people are a joke. They're overpaid entertainers. And they shouldn't have even had that. It's a privilege to be in an illusion of fame and fortune, if you ask me. And they abuse their privilege of power. They abuse it every single day. And that's wrong. And that goes for anybody in government, too.
Well, one of the subjects in your book when it comes to controlling the masses, you mentioned the invention of religions. What if I told you that one of our future books is going to be about the modern birth of a new religion that we're witnessing right now, and most people do not yet understand it to be a religion?
I can't wait to read it.
Well, what I'm talking about is called ancient astronaut theory. The largest proponent of ancient astronaut theory, the idea that extraterrestrials had some type of hand in creating the human race, the largest proponent of this theory is a television program called Ancient Aliens that is owned by Prometheus Studios, produced by Prometheus Studios. Now, what most people don't know is that Prometheus Studios is owned by the same elite family who, since the early 1900s, were trying to find and paying for expeditions to locate the ancient homeland of the Anunnaki in the ancient East.
Very interesting.
So, it is very possible that even in the arena of free thought, that many things we consider to be in the realm of outside-the-box thinking are themselves new paradigms that are being engineered for us.
Mm-hmm. I very much agree on that. You're spot on. It's interesting. You're a very good investigator. That's a good point you're bringing up. I didn't know that. So once again, and also it correlates with all of this, the DNA imprinting and all these templates people or covert intelligence has been taking and adapting. You wonder why NSA is always watching and hearing and listening. Well, it's not just about NSA. It's about other covert intelligence agencies, but they're data mining for reasons. And it's not just about finding out what you eat for breakfast. It's just about your DNA, your consciousness, what your state of being is, your celestial heritage. And the best way they can do that is to get inside of you through the interface of covert intel and artificial intelligence. I was going to say, when you talk about the new religion, you have to incorporate the electronic God, because that's the new God, is the electronic AI. It's the God. It's the new one, like in the movie THX 1138.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. You are absolutely correct. And now, for people who still doubt that AI and cybernetic technology is a threat, please do read the presidential budgets that have been published since 2007, and you will find millions of dollars allotted to DARPA and other R&D firms that work with the U.S. government to specifically develop cybernetic implants and enhancements for super soldiers and godlike thinking. This is not a secret. It is not top secret. It is available to read in the federal budgets and in other bills that are passed through Congress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I was pulled in 2004, that just to make a point here, that I was pulled into that covert program in 2004. Obama knew about it because I notified the White House about that induction. And then he decided to escalate the AI interface, and all the technology I was exposed to and those brain templates were sold. I guarantee you. So just a heads up on that.
It's like the One Ring. You alert your representative because you know about something that you've been exposed to, and then when they look at it, they can't destroy it. They have to claim it for themselves.
Correct. And instead of helping or assisting me in any way or shape or form, no, they did the opposite. Yep. Amazing, isn't it?
Well, the problem that they're going to have is that, in my opinion, there is nothing as unstoppable as an awakened humanity. No machine or cybernetic enhancement of any shape or form is going to withstand the capabilities of awakened human beings. And I say that with honesty because of all the ancient cultures I have researched, the ones with the least apparent technological development were the most successful.
Yep.
And you can even find in some parts of ancient Europe Neolithic people that were living better than later Bronze Age people and Iron Age people. So the ingenuity and the capabilities of a humanity that operates in tandem with nature can prove to be a terrible foe for an artificial god.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. And one thing also I want to make a point of is the cybernetic enhancement is a dampening field. So when people get interfaced with the technology, yeah, it can be used as a booster, don't get me wrong, but it's mostly a dampening field on the neural circuits. So what it does is try to dim your aura, your four-body system, and what we call light body in Merkaba. And William Henry writes about singularity, which is very spot on because what it is a weaponization of the light body into artificial intelligence. So just a heads up on that one.
Very good. You know, you are a walking encyclopedia on the shady dealings of our representatives, and I applaud you for all of your excellent research and insight.
Well, thank you. And likewise, this is a mutual admiration society, Jason, because I can say the same thing about you. We both know our stuff when we dive into it, and we're searchers, and we seek the truth, and we get the truth. Sometimes in the worst ways through mine was experience, but I certainly applaud you for who you are too, and thank you. You know, I must say, it's been great having you on tonight. This has been an incredible show. So you're very good at asking questions. I must say, I should give you my show sometime to fill in. You can be my special host, guest host.
Well, you know, I'm much too shy for that, but or I may do a guest host. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Well, you don't sound shy to me. You sound great. That's for darn sure. Well, if anybody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
Well, you can find me on Facebook, and our website is AlleghenyMounds.com. We will be launching a new website soon that will be more devoted towards deconstructing the dying paradigm of Western civilization. And we're going to be taking a lot of steps to be more interactive with people who may read our work, because our goal is to get as many people on board with the social transformation that's happening as possible. So we seek to activate other creative people. In fact, if you're listening to this show, understand that Solaris BlueRaven and myself are only two people, and if we can share the type of information between the two of us that we have tonight, imagine if all of the people listening to this program found the calling within themselves and the niche that they're meant to research and study and the wall they're meant to fight on, because that is how a renaissance or great awakening starts.
Absolutely. Well said. You know, I must say it's people like you that make this world a better place. And I'll say that point blank. And there's a lot of people out there, but it's thank goodness that there are beings like you out there who are doing this type of work, who are here as a voice with wisdom and enlightenment, who are more than beacons. Because without that, the world is already becoming a very dark place. So thank you, Jason, for what you do, and Sarah, and just, I can't thank you enough, quite honestly, because you are doing phenomenal work. And I say that to everybody, too, who's out there. We're dealing with hostile worlds. You know, you all, I know that most of the listeners are very enlightened beings. And you have to understand that you are a star being in a suit, and that we can't keep going on this dark spiral anymore. We've got to take control over this ship. So however that's done.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Yep.
You know, there are some people who believe that there's a force that's guiding human destiny in a particular direction right now. We don't need to be guided. In fact, if there is something guiding us, it's clearly not guiding us in a favorable direction. We need to learn to guide ourselves again.
Mm-hmm.
And the first step to doing that is to realize that you are an intellectual. You are the artist, the inventor. It is you. It is your hands that are meant to sculpt reality. You are not meant to be the clay in the hands of tyrants.
Very well said. Old soul speaking there, Jason. I can tell you're very old, ancient soul. I told you that before when you've been on the show. I can tell. Words of wisdom.
Well, I'm getting more ancient by the day. I have a birthday coming up next week. I'll finally
You really?
be 18.
Aw.
Yes.
Well, happy birthday, because, my birthday was on the 20th, so we're pretty close.
Pretty close, yeah.
That's great. Well, have a wonderful, wonderful birthday, I must say. And we're just about out of time here. I do want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. And, stay tuned for Shiny Side Out with David Dunger and Becky coming up next to Sailing On into the Night from Down Under, as they always do with their wonderful, wonderful show. Not sure what they're talking about this week. I know they were talking about the quantum mind last week. But is there anything else you want? We have about 2 minutes here, Jason. Anything you want to add for the next 2 minutes?
Well, I would just like to say that shows like this and the type of people who listen to these types of shows and who check out research by yourself or who may read our books when they come out, this is the proof that the world is going to change for the better. Because the simple fact that we have this type of dialogue and there's an audience for it means that the system has failed to brainwash the entire population. And this has been an elaborate and very old operation. It's been an expensive operation. And the fact that we're still sentient and able to think for ourselves means that humanity is winning this struggle.
That's well said. Yeah, we have immunity. At least some of us do. We don't have the zombie formula working in us, so that's good. Yeah. A lot of people do, though. A lot of people are being slept, but there are many who are awake and aware and are out there doing something about it. So, yeah, we don't want to get the majority of who are being slept in the illusion of power. We just can't have that anymore. So, yeah, it's moving.
And I would love to be a guest host with you sometime. I think that would be awesome.
Really, anytime. Let me know. I'll put you on the schedule. I'd love to have you on. I know everybody adores you. So, yeah, you're wonderful. You're just a breath of fresh air with communicating and the information and the work that you do. I can't wait for your book to come out. So please let us know, and then I'll make sure that I put it on my promotions for my listing and make sure I let everybody know when it's live. It's going to be through Amazon, I take it, or is that where you're putting it out?
Well, wherever it ends up going, it'll certainly be available through Amazon. And when it comes out, maybe I can come on the show and we'll talk about it upon release.
Perfect.
And
sounds wonderful.
Let people know a little bit about what's inside of it. And we're really excited because a lot of the information on the ancient giants that we couldn't release until our book was published. So.
Excellent. Well, Jason, we're out of time here. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure as always. Thank you, Jerry B. Thanks for everybody to tune in, and thank you all for listening. And until next time, everybody be safe out there. It's a weird world. All right. Have a great week, everybody.